Hey, you! I'm going to do a reading with you on this, and besides, did you forget I was in the title card anyway?
Well,
Let's just read the pasta.
so this is my crossover review with Catvan92 about Banjo's Mirror. And what do I have to say about the story? It seems rather cliche and confusing. Kind of reminds me of that Super Mario 64 Damned video that I talked about in that top 11 creepypastas I went to. And I guess it's fine? I'm just confused. Like, at one point, Banjo's killing his friend. At another moment, he's being tortured and losing his limbs and screaming, "Ah! I'm losing my limbs!" and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, he's in a torture chamber and he's back to normal and then he's still being tortured. Pretty much a review where everything's kind of confusing and you just kind of have to reread it just to figure out what's going on. But it's kind of interesting trying to put in vlogs where it'd be like every day, I'm going to try the game here, and then the next time I'm going to try the game, it might be a little different. And kind of like with Happy Appy, which was trying to do that, and the NES Godzilla, it was kind of like that too, trying to do little vlogs and trying to show how over time games can get different or whatever, and it's a good idea, but it just wasn't the best execution. I remember some ordinary gamers doing this at one point, so it's kind of fun for me and this other person I just met on DVR doing this. Just a heads up, if his voice quality isn't that good, I apologize. He's recording off his computer, so it's not going to be the best. So I do apologize for that in advance, but don't put any blame on him. I mean, beforehand I was trying to use that myself before I even considered making videos with this camera, so I wasn't in the same position he was. So yeah, without further ado, let's get this crossover going. I suppose that before I start to tell you all my story, I should tell you that it's very hard for me to tell. It hurts me to even think about it, so forgive me if I start to get emotional.
I had just become a werewolf in Skyrim and was screwing around in Whiterun. The usual just running around on useless save files, killing people. I just recently bought Banjo Kazooie off eBay for a few bucks. I couldn't wait for it to arrive. Well, today it came.
I heard a thud coming from outside in front of my door, so I quickly turned off my Xbox 360 and ran upstairs. When I opened my front door, there was a package. I quickly ran inside and opened it, finding the cartridge for Banjo Kazooie, with a note taped to it. I took off the note, and a flash drive had fallen out of it.
All the note had on it was the word sorry.exe. I thought little of it and threw the note away and plugged in my Nintendo 64 and put in my favorite game, Banjo Kazooie. It had been a very long time since I played Banjo Kazooie and I couldn't wait to play the game. There was already a file created. Assuming it was a file of the previous owner, I left it alone and created a new file on the second picture.
I had played the game for a few days and noticed a few bugs. Every once in a while, the screen would randomly flicker red and white very quickly, and then return to normal. I figured it was just because the game cartridge was old and continued to play. After I had started the Glitter Gulch Mine World, I began to notice that there were fewer enemies than I had remembered. I put this off as me just not remembering it correctly, and continued to play. After being Glitter Gulch Mine, I moved on to the world named Witchy World. After roaming around Witchy World for a while, I got bored and began climbing the ladder that led up to the dive area. It's the area where you jump from the top and into a pool at the bottom. Any Banjo Kazooie fan knows what I'm talking about. Anyways, as I got to the top, I paused the game to go get a Pepsi from upstairs. When I came back, the game was unpaused, and Banjo was just staying there, not moving. Almost as if he was looking straight at me through the television screen.
At first, I thought that when I got up, I had kicked the controller, causing it to unpause and turn Banjo around. So I picked up the controller and tried moving Banjo with the control stick. Only for him to not move, I began rapidly tapping buttons to see if it was just my controller. Nothing worked. Banjo didn't jump, nor did the camera zoom in or out. I thought that something was loose in the outlet where you plug the controller into the Nintendo 64. So I leaned over put my right hand on the system and my left hand on the cord and was about to pull it out when I heard the sound that Banjo makes when he talks. So I looked up to see the most disturbing dialogue. Right on the screen were the words.
I stood up and ran to my bed and began to stare at the screen. What the hell? I began to ask myself what was happening. Banjo suddenly began to move in ways I had never seen before. It was almost lifelike. He took his backpack off his back and began rummaging through it. He eventually pulled out a picture of me. Yes, it was me myself. I put my hand up to my mouth in complete and utter shock, not knowing what would happen next, and was about to scream when more dialogue showed up by itself on the screen.
The camera zoomed in into the picture of my face and it was starting to become grotesque and mangled up. Blood started oozing from my eyes and mouth, and my jaw seemed to start becoming more and more dislocated. My flesh started peeling off and revealing the muscles in my skin.
Then, as the picture became more and more grisly, a screech emanated from the speakers. But it wasn't a cartoonish video game scream. This was the most realistic and disturbing scream I have ever heard in my life. The camera suddenly zoomed out to reveal Banjo choking Kazooie, literally choking with one fist clamped around the bird's neck. Banjo had a look of pure hatred in his eyes as he shook the bird back and forth, the screeching becoming more and more violent and painful to listen to until it became gagging and slowly faded until it was silent. Only the music of Witchy World could be heard playing in the background. Banjo just grinned and threw the lifeless bird off the edge and snickered to himself.
At this point in time, I was already scared to death that it was. But seeing Banjo the bear violently strangle Kazooie to death, well, that made it 10 times worse. I sat there, staring at Banjo laughing to himself with his evil smirk for a few more moments before his voice began to echo around my room. I could hear his gobbling sound he makes when he talks it grow in volume.
At this point in time, I was already scared to death as it was, but seeing Banjo the bear violently strangle Kazooie to death, well, that just made it 10 times worse. I sat there staring at Banjo laughing to himself with his evil smirk for a few more moments before his voice began to echo around my room. I could hear his gobbling sound he would make when he talks low in volume. I looked at the screen to see the words. I screamed and quickly jumped off my bed and to the Nintendo 64, pulling the power switch, turning the system off. I couldn't take any more of what was happening. I still haven't turned on the console since the incident took place.
I was afraid too. What will happen to me if I do? Well, I suppose that tomorrow is the day that I find out. That's right. I'm going to conquer my fears and turn the game back on tomorrow. I will be recording what happened that night on this blog again, so you will know every single thing that happens.
So I turned the game back on today, and I regret doing it. As soon as I turned the power on, the screen flash ran black quickly. It did this for a few minutes until I could make out Banjo swinging on a swing. I could hear a faint squeaking as Banjo moved back and forth on the swing. I could hear the music that plays in Witchy World in the background, except it was distorted, making it painful to listen to. Banjo continued swinging, but I noticed he began to slowly turn his head towards the screen.
After a minute or two of this, he stopped swinging and just stared at me with his cold eyes. I just about to press the pause button when he got off the swing and started walking towards me. I rapidly began to push the pause button, but it wouldn't pause.
Banjo continued to walk towards me. Slowly he made his way over. I literally started screaming as he got closer and closer to the screen. I could hear the laughter of Gruntilda the Witch in the background, slightly distorted, but growing in volume. Banjo finally got so close to the camera that only his head could be seen. Then everything stopped. The music, the laughter, everything. For a few moments, I could catch my breath. But then, all of a sudden, Banjo's head was thrusted towards the right, popping bones out of his neck, and then the other way, the same thing happened.
I instantly vomited all over myself, my bed and the floor. Blood was all over Banjo. Then his head was thrusted forward and backward. Bones popped out everywhere. Banjo's eyes turned pitch black as he stood there.
He began to slowly float upward into the sky. He eventually stopped, and I knew what was going to happen. He was going to be brutally beaten again. And I was right. At first, only his left leg was slowly lifted into the air, but then violently twisted. Bones popped out of the back of his knee and his leg. The same thing happened to the right leg, but Banjo had begun to scream this time. His arms were lifted into the air and pulled out of the sockets, flying in separate directions. Blood went everywhere. The screen flashed red, and then showed Banjo saying some sort of torture contraption.
A lever was pulled as the machine began to pull Banjo apart. The screaming became more intense. His body was ripped apart and his intestines spilled onto the floor. The screen flashed red again, and Banjo was sitting in Spiral Mountain in front of his house doing his usual idle animation, such as moving his head back and forth, etc.
Yesterday when Banjo was back in front of his house in Spiral Mountain, I saved the game and turned the system off, not wanting to see any more gruesome things happen. Plus, I had to clean up the vomit that was all over me, the bed, and the floor.
I put the flash drive into my computer today. All that was on it was the text document named sorry.exe. I instantly recognized that name, thinking back to the note that came with the game. I opened the file and the following text appeared on my screen.
I quickly threw out both the game cartridge and the flash drive. I hope nothing like this ever happens to me again.